Video game movies have had one of the weirdest journeys in entertainment. For the longest time, they were known for getting almost everything wrong. Fans would hear that a favorite game was being turned into a movie and immediately expect the worst. Bad casting, confusing story changes, awkward dialogue, and a version of the game world that barely felt connected to what made it special in the first place. But every once in a while, an adaptation actually understands what it is supposed to be doing. It captures the tone, the energy, the world, and most importantly, the feeling of playing the game. And that is what makes the difference. A great adaptation does not always have to copy every single detail perfectly, but it does need to understand why the source material mattered to fans in the first place. So today, we're counting down 10 video game movies to figure out which ones completely missed the point, which ones came surprisingly close, and which one actually got it right. Number 10, Borderlands. This one lands at the bottom because it somehow takes one of gaming's wildest, loudest, most chaotic worlds and makes it feel weirdly lifeless. Borderlands should be colorful, reckless, violent, funny, and a little unhinged. It should feel like pure mayhem with attitude. Instead, the movie feels like it's constantly holding itself back. The biggest problem is tone. The games have a very specific identity. They're sarcastic, over-the-top, dirty, explosive, and full of unpredictable energy. The movie feels like a studio trying to smooth out everything strange and risky until only the recognizable brand name remains. You can see familiar character names and pieces of the iconography, but the personality just is not there. That's what makes Borderlands such a disappointing adaptation. It fails because it never commits to what the franchise is. Instead of feeling dangerous and chaotic, it feels sanitized. Instead of feeling like a lawless sci-fi wasteland, it feels like a watered-down imitation. And when a Borderlands movie doesn't feel bold, weird, or fun enough, that is a huge problem. Number 9, Super Mario Bros. 1993. Super Mario Bros. 1993 is one of the strangest video game adaptations ever made. On one hand, you almost have to respect how bizarre this movie is. It does not play it safe. It swings hard, and it creates a grimy cyberpunk version of the Mario universe that absolutely nobody was asking for. On the other hand, almost nothing about it feels like Super Mario in the way fans actually want it. This movie has Mario, Luigi, King Koopa, Daisy, Goombas, and Fungus. But it remixes everything into something so aggressively weird that it barely resembles the bright, playful energy of the games. The Mushroom Kingdom turns into a dark alternate city. The Goombas become giant lizard-headed henchmen. King Koopa is less fantasy villain and more eccentric businessman. Part of the reason it is not dead last is because it has personality. It is messy, misguided, and often ridiculous, but it is memorable. There is at least some imagination here, even if it's pointed in the wrong direction. As a Mario movie, it gets almost everything wrong, but as a bizarre artifact, it remains impossible to forget. Number 8, Doom. This is one of those movies that feels like it understands one obvious part of the source material, but misses the bigger picture. Yes, Doom is about blasting monsters, running through corridors, and surviving overwhelming danger. But Doom is not just about generic sci-fi action. It is about speed, aggression, dread, and the raw feeling of tearing through hell with unstoppable momentum. The film spends too much time turning Doom into a standard military horror movie. Instead of feeling like a relentless descent into demonic chaos, it feels like another early 2000s sci-fi thriller that just happens to be wearing the Doom name. Fans still remember the first-person action sequence because it is the one moment when the adaptation suddenly clicks and you can see the movie becoming what it should have been all along. That famous sequence is honestly the best argument in the movie's favor. For a few minutes, it captures the direct, visceral energy of the game better than the rest of the film. But one inspired section cannot save an adaptation that spends most of its runtime being far more ordinary than the game ever was. Doom is not a total disaster, but it never becomes the fast, furious nightmare it needed to be. Number 7, Street Fighter. Street Fighter may not work as a truly faithful adaptation of the game's fight-driven appeal, but it still manages to survive through pure chaotic entertainment value alone. This film is loud, goofy, campy, and completely excessive. It barely feels interested in recreating the actual experience of Street Fighter as a competitive martial arts world where iconic fighters clash one-on-one. Instead, it turns the whole thing into a wild military action comedy with an ensemble cast. From a strict adaptation standpoint, that means it misses a lot. The structure is not really about the tournament setup fans associate with the series. Characters are bent into strange roles. The tone is way sillier and more cartoonish than the games usually present themselves. And yet, against all odds, the movie remains fun because it leans fully into its own absurdity instead of pretending to be something serious. The reason Street Fighter ranks above the lower entries is simple. It may not be accurate, but it is at least entertaining in a way that feels big, colorful, and unapologetic. The characters are exaggerated. The dialogue is quotable. The whole film feels like a chaotic live-action cartoon. So no, Street Fighter did not really get it right, but it got enough of the energy right to remain weirdly lovable. Number 6. Resident Evil. This is where the ranking gets more complicated. The first live-action Resident Evil movie is not especially faithful if you compare it directly to the games. It invents a central protagonist who was not part of the original stories, builds a more action-driven structure, and moves some of the focus away from the slow-burn survival horror that defined early Resident Evil. But even while making major changes, the movie still understands some core parts of Resident Evil. It knows the world should feel corporate, sinister, and infected by biohazard experiments gone horribly wrong. It knows there should be monsters, creeping dread, lockdown facilities, and the sense that science has unleashed something it cannot control. The Umbrella Corporation feels central. The atmosphere matters. The movie gets the basic DNA even when it remixes the details. What keeps it in the middle of the ranking is that it drifts away from horror and towards stylized action as the series goes on. Still, judged on its own, the original Resident Evil has enough mood, tension, and franchise identity to avoid the lower tier. It may not be the adaptation fans dreamed of, but it is more in tune with its source than many earlier attempts. It does not fully get Resident Evil right, but it gets enough right to matter. Number 5. Silent Hill. This is one of the first entries on the list that genuinely feels like the filmmakers cared about recreating the experience of the games, not just borrowing the title. Silent Hill understands atmosphere better than most game movies ever made. The fog, the ash, the decaying environments, the oppressive sound design, and the constant feeling of psychological unease all help it feel like it came from the same nightmare space as the games. What the movie gets right most of all is mood. Silent Hill should feel disturbing, sad, symbolic, and dreamlike. It should feel like a place shaped by guilt, trauma, and buried horrors. The film captures that visual and emotional discomfort extremely well. Even when the narrative gets messy or over-explains certain ideas, the world itself feels right. The reason it does not rank higher is because Silent Hill is not just about creepy visuals. The best Silent Hill games are subtle in ways the movie is not. They leave space for ambiguity. They trust the player to sit with uncertainty. The film sometimes becomes too literal and too focused on spectacle, when the series is often more powerful when it stays intimate and psychologically haunting. Still, compared to so many other adaptations, Silent Hill gets an impressive amount correct. It understands that the horror is not just monsters. It is grief, punishment, memory, and fear made physical. Number 4. Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. Final Fantasy Advent Children is a fascinating case because it works best for people who already have a connection to the game world it continues. Unlike some other adaptations, this one does not try to reinvent the franchise for newcomers. Instead, it leans fully into the mythology, emotion, and style of the world it comes from. In that sense, it may actually be one of the most faithful entries on this list. The movie absolutely looks and feels like Final Fantasy. It has the dramatic action, the emotional intensity, the beautiful character designs, the giant sword combat, the tragic mood, and the sense of spiritual and personal conflict that fans associate with the series. More specifically, it feels like an extension of Final Fantasy VII's universe, taking familiar characters and pushing them into a more cinematic continuation of their story. What holds it back from the top three is accessibility. Advent Children works because it is so deeply connected to the game that inspired it, but that also means it can feel overwhelming or emotionally distant if you are not already invested. As a movie on its own, it can be hard to fully connect with every story beat. As a love letter to the game world and characters, though, it gets a lot right. That makes it one of the better examples of a game-based film that truly respects its source material, even if it depends heavily on the audience bringing their own history with them. Number 3. Lara Croft Tomb Raider 2001. A movie that does something extremely important for any adaptation. It understands its main character. More than plot accuracy or direct scene recreation, this movie succeeds because it knows Lara Croft has to feel capable, stylish, intelligent, adventurous, and larger than life. That may sound simple, but it matters. Tomb Raider was never just about archaeology or action scenes. It was about the fantasy of following an elite explorer into dangerous ruins, ancient mysteries, and globe-spanning threats with total confidence. The 2001 movie captures that spirit really well. It has exotic locations, supernatural artifacts, action set pieces, and a heroine who feels like she stepped out of the cultural image of Lara that defined that era. The film is definitely a product of its time, and not every part of it has aged perfectly. But as a translation of the Tomb Raider vibe, it works. It feels adventurous, it feels slick, it feels like a blockbuster version of the game's treasure hunting energy. Most importantly, it feels like it actually wants to celebrate Lara Croft instead of stripping away what made her iconic. That strong grasp of character gives it a major advantage over many other game movies. It may not be flawless, but it absolutely understands the fantasy it is selling. Number 2. Sonic the Hedgehog 2020. One of the clearest examples of a studio course-correcting and then actually delivering. What makes Sonic work is not just that it includes familiar elements from the games. It is that the movie recognizes what Sonic is supposed to feel like. Fast, playful, bright, mischievous, and full of heart. Sonic as a character can be difficult to adapt because his games have always mixed speed, attitude, humor, and sincerity in unusual proportions. Lean too hard into jokes and he becomes annoying. Lean too hard into nostalgia and he becomes hollow fan service. This movie finds a surprisingly solid balance. Sonic feels energetic and expressive without losing his likability. The movie also deserves credit for understanding accessibility. It was made for broad audiences, yes, but it still respects what fans love about Sonic. The design, the speed, the rings, the rivalry with Robotnik, and the sense of colorful adventure. It simplifies certain things, but it does not erase the character's identity in the process. That is why Sonic ranks so high. It may not be the most ambitious adaptation on this list, but it knows what makes its franchise appealing and translates that into a crowd-pleasing movie that feels genuine rather than embarrassed by its roots. Number 1. The Super Mario Bros. Movie 2023. This is the movie that got it the most right. This film succeeds because it understands a truth that the 1993 version completely missed. Mario does not need to be radically reinvented to work on screen. The appeal is already there. The color, the music, the movement, the power-ups, the worlds, the enemies, the platforming logic, and the cheerful sense of adventure are the entire point. The 2023 movie embraces all of that. It is unapologetically Mario. It does not treat the source material like something that has to be hidden behind irony or realism. It trusts the Mushroom Kingdom to be vibrant, weird, magical, and fun. It lets the environments look like they came from the games. It lets the action feel playful. It fills the movie with references. But the key difference is that the references are built into the fabric of the world instead of replacing the story. More importantly, it captures the spirit of Mario as a franchise. Mario has always been about momentum, imagination, and clear, joyful adventure. The movie moves with that same energy. It is fast, colorful, simple in the best way, and completely comfortable being a family-friendly fantasy built on game logic. That confidence is exactly what makes it work as an adaptation. Is it the deepest movie on this list? No. But in terms of understanding what the game is, how the world should feel, and what fans wanted to see, that is why the Super Mario Bros. Movie is #1 on this list. So that's the ranking. Some of these movies missed the mark completely, some of them got a few important things right, and a few actually proved that adapting a game for the big screen can work when the people behind it understand the world they are bringing to life. At the end of the day, the biggest difference between a bad adaptation and a good one usually comes down to respect. Not just for the name of the franchise, but for the tone, the characters, the atmosphere, and the experience fans connected with in the first place. Now it's your turn. Which video game movie do you think got it right? And which one do you think failed the hardest? Drop your ranking in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more rankings, gaming retrospectives, and movie breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.